let's hit a covenant with God, having a covenant with God. And basically, when we talk about covenant, we're talking about the blessing of God, the protection of God, the empowerment of God. When we talk about covenant, we're talking about the blessing of God, the protection of God, and the empowerment of God. And then let's go to Genesis. Genesis 1:22. This is when you see the first blessing. Genesis 1:22, it says, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful, productive, multiply, so duplicate yourself, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the fowl multiply the earth. So again, when God is blessing us, we're dependent on God for our existence and function. We're dependent on God for our existence and function. Then just walking through some things, Genesis 5 is when God blessed, actually if you read through Genesis 5, the interesting thing is Genesis 4 talks about Cain and Abel. It talks about Adam and Eve begetting Cain and Abel. And then it talks about the first murder. But the interesting thing is, you go to Genesis 5, it starts off and says, this is the generations of Adam. So you're saying to yourself, okay, well, wait a minute. But it just said that they begat Cain and Abel. It was trying to break down the first murder through envy, jealousy, and based on one person giving the best of themselves and the other person giving their leftover, which was Cain and Abel. Then it started off the generations that lead to us in Genesis 5. And it says, so that's the beginning of the history of believing me. So up to that point, if you think about Adam and Eve, kind of took things for granted, and Eve didn't believe God, so she actually ended up sinning against God by eating of the tree he told her not to do. She just had the opportunity to believe God. Had an opportunity to submit to authority, to draw authority, but she didn't believe God, and of course Adam followed her. Then you had Cain and Abel, they extended from that, and they didn't believe God. So, then when you get to Genesis 5 starts to delineate the generation that leads up to Jesus, which of course leads up to the life that we live now. And it starts with, I believe, Seth. So there's a blessing that starts at the beginning of that history of believing men. Then there's another blessing in Genesis 6, and that was after God cleansed the earth of people that were committing sins and doing all types of crazy things. Even the fall, what happens is the fallen angels, I just like to explain things. This is not our total topic here, but it's all in my head. But Genesis 6, the fallen angels, as a result of Satan being cast down to him, a third of the angels went with him. We went over this when we talked about angels in one of the other training classes. But so now there are fallen angels on the earth, and then there's God put his people on the earth. He put us on the earth. And so the fallen angels were trying to mate with people on the earth. That's what created giants. The family of Gath, which of course where Goliath came from. All right, so everything was just going crazy. Imagine fallen angels imparting into men the same spirit that Satan had to him, or originally Lucifer had to him. So God said, okay, we need to do a cleanup act. So then there's a flood, and everything's cleaned up. And then right after the flood, there was another blessing, because now God was starting a new generation through Noah. So that's Genesis 6. Okay, so generations go by, and then that brings us to Genesis 12, which is really what I want to get to. Can't give you everything, but I try to give you at least some things that stimulate your thinking so you go study it for yourself. But Genesis 12, it says, now the Lord had said unto Abram, now this is when he was Abram, it wasn't yet Abraham, but Abram, get thee out of thy country, get thee from thy kindred. So leave the place where you at, leave the people that you've been accustomed to being around, and from thy father's house unto a land which I will show thee. He says, and I will make thee a great nation. I will bless thee, number one. I will make thy name great. So I'm going to bless you, you're going to have a reputation, and thou shalt be a blessing to other people. So I'm only creating a rep or giving you a platform to draw people to you so you could be a blessing to other people. It says, and thou shalt be a blessing. And then verse 3 it says, and I will bless them that bless thee. So you're going to be a blessing. And then right after the, I believe that's a colon, doing the best I can to see. But right after the colon, he says, this is how you're going to be a blessing. He says, I'm going to bless everyone that blesses you. He says, but then, he says, I'm going to curse them that curse you. He says, in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. So he broke it down. I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless them that bless you. I'm going to curse them that curse you. So he basically says, you'll be the measure for everybody else's blessings. So how people bless you determines their blessings. How people curse you determines their curses. And see, so once we connect to our covenant with God, we maintain our covenant with God, now what God does is, okay, he says, I'm going to make sure I bless you. So blessing is a verbal endorsement. It's God's word, the same word in Genesis 1 that created everything, going out ahead of you and opening up every aspect of your life. So it's almost like, best way I can describe it is if you ever seen, well, I'm a little older, but they have a new one. Get Smart. I know they have a new one. I don't know if y'all ever seen an old one. Some of us that are older saw the old one. But the movie Get Smart, the old one, I don't think they did it in the new one, but in the old one, he would walk into whatever control, it was called control, right? And every time he took a step, a door would open. And then he took another step and another door would open. He took another step and a door would open. So that's almost, that's how God is when he blesses us, we take the step and doors are opening up before us. When we're in covenant with God and we're walking in the blessing of God, doors are just opening up. We take a step, another door. We take another step, a door open. Another step, door. But the interesting thing is, if again, you have to maybe go back and look at the old Get Smart. If he, one time in the movie, he tried to turn around. And I think the door closed on his nose or something like that. So he says, God's opening up doors ahead of you. You know, so that's what blessing looks like. I'm in covenant with God, and I'm moving forward, and God's out ahead of me. Oh, remember we talked about the straight gate, Matthew 7, narrow is the way, that straight gate. God's on that straight path, that narrow path, out ahead of you, opening up doors for you. That's what blessing looks like. And, okay, this is the thing, is he told him to leave from his family. If you go to Genesis, well, I'm going to give you the verses, you have to read it for yourself. He told him to leave his whole family, but Abraham took his son, he took his brother's son with him. See, because the tradition at that time, I think I taught this before, the tradition, you would have to go study this in the Kamash. The Kamash is a Jewish breakdown of the Torah. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible. So they took the time to really study it out, whether through the Apocrypha, the Apocrypha is books that were written at that time, but it wasn't, this is training class, so I'm a little more specific. It was written at that time, but they couldn't prove that it was spiritually inspired, like God breathed on it. And so every book in the Bible was canonized. Canonized meaning that they knew this was God breathed. All the other books in the Apocrypha, doesn't mean that they're not true. It just, if we couldn't authenticate it as God breathed, it's not going to go through the test of time. People may question this, or they may question the character of the person that wrote it. You know, it could be Josephus or the Maccabees. That's the Apocrypha. They could go, I don't know. Remember, Josephus, remember we called him with a whore last week or something like that. So it might not be in here. But what they did in the Kamash, they went through all the history. They exhaustively went through the history, and they kind of broke it down. So when they broke down what happened with Abraham, we just read it as, get thee out from their kindred, which is hard for us to leave family if we're really close to family, especially getting married. It says, leave your mother and father and cleave to your wife. Leave and cleave. That's kind of hard to leave a comfort zone and to go in an unknown zone. That's very difficult because we're creatures of habit, and we're creatures of comfort. All right, but the interesting thing is it was even more difficult for Abraham because this is back when everything first began. So not following the rules and the laws were not even an option. See, now we decide whether we want to follow the rules and the laws. I think I want to follow that. Now I want to follow that. But that doesn't apply to me. No, back then they followed everything in the book. So one of the things in the book is, as a family, if a parent was dying or doing bad, you would take care of that person. So you would stop what you're doing, or in addition to you taking care of your family, you would have to take care of your father. So his father was getting old. His father was dying. His father, I believe his name was Terah. He had took him to that part. He was supposed to go to the land of Canaan. He stopped off in Egypt. Abraham was supposed to go to the land of Canaan. He stopped off in Egypt. When you read, Isaac was supposed to go. He stopped off. Everybody stopping off is supposed to go where God told him to go. But he honored his father, says, I'm going to take care of him. Then his brother dies. He says, okay, well, now I have to take care of his son, because that's what the laws were at the time. But what God did was, God put his blessing on him, and it was a blessing of chosenness. So once God chooses you, all the protocols that you would normally follow are out the window. Now your only protocol is to be obedient to God. See, until then, you're subject to your parents. Do exactly what they tell you to do. You know, when you're under their house, you're under their rule, you're supposed to follow every letter of what they tell you to do. But when God chooses you to do something, you're supposed to do with every letter of what God tells you to do. Independent of mom, dad, sister, brother, cousin, and any other obligation. And that's what Abraham was struggling with, because he was so cool with compliance. You know how you feel safe with compliance? Like, well, I dot my I's and I crossed my T's, so I'm safe, right? But now God is saying, leave safe and move into faith. He said, now you're going to have to be obedient to what I tell you to do. So he says, we're going to have a covenant now. You honor my covenant and do everything I tell you to do. I'm going to bless them that bless you. I'm going to bless them that bless you. Curse them that curse you. He said, in you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. I'm going to create a nation through you. And then in chapter 13, Abraham's getting closer to that. So we go through this. You know, God tells us to do something, and we do it, but it's uncomfortable. So we go, okay, God, I'm going to do it. So I'll be like, well, this is more than I was doing before, so this is cool. So Abraham did everything, but he kept his brother's son. Because you know how you feel like, well, who's going to take care of him? My dad can't take care of him. My cousin's a trip. You're not trusting that God knows he needs to be taken care of. You go do what I tell you to do. So he took Lot with him. But then here in Genesis 13:14, it says, and the Lord, Abraham took Lot with him, but Lot had servants, Abraham had servants, and eventually Lot's servants were striving with Abraham's servants. They had so much stuff they were striving, going back and forth. So eventually Abraham said, no, we're going to have to make a decision here. He said, because we're family. It's not good that we strive like this. He said, so Abraham was so confident in God. He said, tell you what, man, just choose what you want, what land you want. You know, back then you could just choose what land you want. Now you got to buy it. But he says, and so Lot, he looked at where Sodom was, and if you study it out back then, Sodom looked splendid. It looked tempting. It looked like, I don't know what land I want. The whole time he wanted Sodom. I'll just take Sodom over there. Is that cool? Because he figured he was choosing the most prosperous land, because it looked like it was blowing up. And Abraham said, fine, you take that and I'll take this and we good. Then it said here, verse 14, it said, the Lord said unto Abraham, after that Lot was separated from him. So he didn't say nothing before he separated, because after Lot separated, he's falling in line with what God told him to do. He said, lift up now thy eyes and look from the place where thou art, northward, southward, eastward, westward. For all the land which thou seest, to thee will I give it unto thy seed forever.